meet somebody today and I can barely remember them.
Well, I remember so much, but I can tell now that my memory is not as good as it used to be, see?
Is that right?
Yeah, I see. Because sometimes I have to think, and then it'll come back an hour later, Something like that. It's not something,
Now, you ended up in the hospital in England at one time, is that right?
Yes.
And was that, and England was bombed while you were in the hospital, is that right?
Yeah, we had a big air raid there in the hospital.
Was that the first time that there was action around you? Was that the first time you saw war activity?
Yeah, we had another bombing raid there. It was on an airfield, but we was close by it. We could see that, but it was night, and we wasn't that close to it. But this year, they was dropping the bombs right there, and so, boy, the lights they had lights on these cords hanging down from the ceiling, and the windows are all blacked out. There's some crosses out by the porch, the little single-level barracks-like buildings. And when there's 3 German multi-crosses out there where the one plane had been shot down before, and they buried them right there. They were still right there next to the building. But when they bombed there, they come over, and they bombed real heavy. But I wasn't that scared, and the nurse come over to me. I guess because I was probably a little younger, and she was a real nice nurse. But I wasn't the kind that want to be babied by a woman, So she come over and sat by my bed, and like she's soothing me. I wondered why she didn't go some of them other guys, and she just had ordinary white uniform on. And finally, when the raid was over with, I continued on, but it was a heavy raid. And well, boy, they were shaking things up real good, But like I say, I hadn't seen anybody killed in action or anything up to that time.
Did the air raid sirens come on?
Oh yeah, there was air raid sirens were blasting away, and everybody was tensed because you didn't know when one was going to come down right on the building. That was bad, But I probably should have been a lot more scared than I was. In fact, it took me a while to get up to a point where I was scared at times, And that's during the war. But one thing that started us out right, when we left England, I was in that hospital because I had stomach problems, and I think it was on account. I look back now, and I think it was on account of eating those rats. I might have got some bacteria in there or something, And but when I left that hospital, I met the nurse, and boy, she was dressed up in a lieutenant's uniform, and boy, she really looked nice, And she told me, she stopped and I talked to her. I was walking down the hill on the sidewalk, and she was coming up. Well, she says, well, I hate to see you go. She says, because, they wouldn't have operated on you anyway for anything if you had appendicitis, because they didn't want to put anybody out of commission for the invasion, because, see, they had, they didn't want to have no invalids laying around, Everybody was being saved for the invasion, and they had to have the space, too, when the invasion started, So I could understand that. There was no problem there. I didn't want to get operated on anyway.
Now, you went over to Normandy, what, D+5, D4?
Four, I think it was 4. I looked back in some of the papers, it was 4. And as I was trying to figure, when we captured Cherbourg, it was before we captured Cherbourg.
So by that time, when you left, was there enough information coming back to know what had already happened over at Normandy?
No.
So it's still pretty top secret, hush hush.
Everything was quiet. Yeah, you didn't say all it was. All it said was the planes were unloading and there was a lot of confusion, and communications was bad, and I could understand that, and so we didn't get really good information until we landed.
So what was the boat ride like?
Well, it was okay, but we started out wrong because the convoy was 3 ships. And we was in the lead, and it was at night. We rendezvoused off the coast of England. And just at dark, the general quarters alarm went off. Everybody below decks was under attack. Well, I'd heard them general quarters in movies, how they sound, that sharp whistle blasting. And we could hear the explosions from up above going through the hull of the ship, you could hear that deep thud and sharp thud, of things are exploding up there. We didn't know at the time what kind of explosions they were, but they were torpedoes. And the boat behind us got hit, and it was sunk. It was loaded with troops too. And I asked the next morning when I come on deck, I talked to the merchant seaman, and the farthest boat back was up against our fantail, the back end of the ship. And I said, what happened to the last boat? He said, it wasn't the last boat, it was a boat right behind us, and they sunk it last night. I said, well, did they get all the guys? And evidently they didn't. They lost a lot of men. And so then we took us a long time to go over to England, to go over France. I thought, Jesus, there's a short jog over there. They zip right over there and start unloading, but it just didn't work that long, that easy. And of course, by the time we start moving into the beach, the tide changed. The tide was at night there. I remember it was pretty high tide running. The boats behind us was wallering down low in the water. They were sinking down low. There wasn't much sticking up when they'd go down in the big swells, But we went, as we were closer to France, the water was just glassy, like oil, and it was a little bit foggy, and the boats started coming out of the fog. You could see them moving. Everything was moving towards the beach, and there was everything on it, barges, all kinds of stuff. And after we got in further, it was quieter there, see, because it wasn't much surf pounding or wave action. Well, we could hear the guns on the beach. So we got up, and just about the time that we started unloading, you always unload on the offshore side of the boat, On down the landing nets, they fooled around up there, and everybody lining up and all this junk, They could a little bit slow on disembarking, and making sure we had all of our equipment. We had a lot of this impregnated clothing for gas, and it was like your clothes is just like they dipped them in wax, but they were flexible. Boy, they were sure felt bad when you got them on, on our gas mask and all that gear, It took up a lot of weight.
So that was impregnated for?
Mustard gas, poison gas.
Really?
Yeah. We got it wasn't long. We got rid of it in a few days. We had them gone. Done. We'd throw them away. Get the soft clothes on, but so then the guys, we had our ammunition and guns, and some guys had bazookas, and Well, you know, it didn't go by your size. Everybody carried the same.
So you're getting into an LC.
Well, we're coming off of the down the cargo nets, and we're getting into a LCI. The way actually the storm, just the tide change, and the waves started getting real high. And boy, oh, we was wallowing around, and the LCI would be down there 25 feet, and the next time it was right up like you think you could step in it, then it'd be right back down again. So guys were hanging on the nets for quite a while trying to get into the LCI. Well, there was a big Indian down there. I called him Chief, that we'd been in replacement battalion with. He was right there with me, and he's a good buddy of mine. He was wounded real bad at the Kasserine Pass in North Africa, Kasserine Pass. He was full of shrapnel. He never got it all out of him. And he was trying to hold on to the net. He figured to hold the LCI against the boat, but that was just too much for anything. So finally he says, drop. Well, he was talking to me. He's right now. And he hollered at me, drop, and everybody on the cargo net dropped. And so they all piled up, about 10 guys. And I covered him, knocked him down and everything, but then we got away. Well, one guy missed the boat. He went down between the ship and the LCI. I figured he's gone, you know. But as we start to pull away from the ship, and you could see they called off landing operations right then. I didn't know that, you know. But we didn't have that many, and we was moving out. I seen this guy come up on the wave out away from us, out in the water more. He popped up, and there was a duck gone by with a cargo net full of supplies in the front end of it. And these guys that operated it all at the back end, see. And the guy reached right out, and I think he was almost the same level as that guy when he come up on this wave, and he just drug him, hauled him right back over. Boy, that guy was lucky. You know, it is.
So what are you wearing? What do you have on for gear at this point?
I had my gas mask on and all my ammunition, carbine ammunition belts, and I didn't have no hand grenades on me there. And that's all I had.
Backpack?
I had my pack, yeah, right.
So you're pretty kind of an awkward
yeah.
get up being in a boat.
Yeah, it's awkward to have the gear on you, but it wasn't that heavy for me. But some guys just looked like they were just loaded down. I was a tall, skinny kid, you know.
And are you just packed in?
Huh?
I mean, is that boat just shoulder to shoulder?
We're on a boat?
Yeah.
Well, the guys were down at different levels. We was in a eating space. There was big long tables there, and the guys were all sitting at the tables in the ship. And I was tired, so I climbed up in the basket up above where luggage is carried, the luggage basket. I just climbed right up over their head, and they was paying cards down below me, and I just slept like a log right there. And
so how long
for a few hours.
How long?
Well, it was just about dusk when we loaded up in the evening, and then by the time we fooled around before morning and daylight, you know, it was a few hours there. That's what bothered me, because I just wanted to hurry and get over there, you know. That's why I went to sleep. And of course the other guy stayed up. We could finally get in. We finally loaded up then, and we wasn't loaded. I think it wasn't over 12 guys in the boat, in the LCI, and we headed for the beach. Well, there was in front of us there was a big sloping barge, and I thought that it was ideal setup here, because there was no water, didn't have to go through no water, and so the LCI went and dropped his front end of the gate there, right on that, and it was sloped down. But the tide was coming in, and that barge that was sitting there was a big one. It was sunk, so it wasn't going to go no place. So that worked pretty good. So we got on the deal and this big barge, and we got out and unloaded. And he took off right now. The LCI just dumped us and left. Well, we was wondering what in the heck to do next because we didn't have no leaders, there. So we huddled up there, and finally one of the guys was there. He says, I was waiting for another load to come in, they would take off, have some guys know what I was doing, hope, I didn't know anything about what to do. We could hear big guns gone. There was no small arms gone. And one of the guys hollered, we got to get off this thing. He says, or we're not going to get off. Because there was, from the upper side of it, there was a catwalk. And a sort of pipe and it arched up over onto the beach. And the water would come in behind it there. So waves is breaking over that catwalk. So boy, we got up there and we had to take turns to make a run for it when the water subsided before the wave broke over the catwalk, because you wouldn't make it if it hit you up there in that catwalk. My gosh, we unloaded then. By then, there was a bunch of this one group left, and they disappeared right away when we got to the beach. And so the rest of us, there was about 6 or 7 of us. We hit the beach, and we couldn't see where the other guys was. So we just went to our left, because it looked like to me that I could see some big bomb craters right there, just a short distance away. So we got into one of them till we get our bearings. Well, the tide kept coming in and washing everything in, because everything was floating out there, a lot of stuff, bodies and everything, in boxes of 10-in-1 rations. And that was a new ration they developed for just the starting of the war, but for the invasion, enough rations in the box for 10 soldiers for 1 day, or 1 soldier for 10 days. We had a Mexican kid with us. He didn't talk much. I think his name was Rodriguez. And by gosh, he would drag the boxes up. The rest of us did some too, but boy, he kept at it. And every time they washed up so close as the tide was coming in, he's getting closer all the time. We had a wall of rations around the top of that bomb crater. And he got into them. He was taking all the good stuff, the jam, good things out of them, And boy, he had that pack of his. We left the next morning up the hill. He had that, and boy, he looked like a camel, such a big hump. Boy, I'd never seen him anymore after that. But they come over and bombed us real heavy at 7 o'clock. And they dropped their bombs, some on the beach and some on the water. None of the bombs was real close to us, but they was close enough. And then there was a lot of shooting going on because of anti-aircraft guns. And then at 11 o'clock that night, they had another raid. And they did the same thing. Well, they did shoot down some planes. They shot down one plane the first raid. And they shot down several more later on. But I slept through it. I slept through that second raid. So you can tell what a false sense of security I had, And of course I changed later on, after we started seeing, when you see the results just as right by you, as we got up on the hill, things changed right away.
I assume the beach then was the first time that you had seen death because of war. I mean, back home you'd seen death in the mine where it was an accident, but now it's war. Is that a different mindset, or can you disassociate, or what happens to a human at that point?
That way, it's like, for instance, before I seen the bodies coming up, floating up in the beach, stuff, and you couldn't hardly, and just goatees. They didn't even look natural, you know. But I didn't stand and look at them or anything like that. I just glanced at them, you know. But I knew that it was getting bad, cold. The irony of it, you know, was getting bad, because I know that the 29th Infantry was made the initial assault on that one of the outfits, and they got hit hard. They was dug in right over on the beach further inland than us, right at the foot of the hill. We was further out where we shouldn't have been out there. We didn't use good sense, but we once got a hold up there. We didn't want to move that night. And the guy named Jesse Owens, he had quite a dramatic thing happen to him later on. He killed another soldier, but anyway, I liked him. And he was from Tennessee. And he says, Woko, he says, I don't know. He says, we better get out over here, get out of here, right this hole, and get over there onto this as the first day. And you could see guys pop up over there along the holes along the edge of the hill, the 29th Infantry. And I don't know how we found out, but we knew it was. And I think maybe the corporal with us had our orders in the box, little steel box. And I said, he said, let's go over there and dig in. I says, well, you can if you want to, but I'm not going over there, because I said, them guys were in here before we were. And I says, they'll think we're scared already. I said, I was afraid somebody's going to think I was scared, see. That was a problem with me. Later on, I did some stupid things because I figured I didn't want anybody to think I was scared. And I got scared, I'll tell you. One thing about it, the soldiers all had one thing. They didn't sit down and pray. Maybe they did to themselves, you know. And the fact is, I think a lot of them did by themselves, you know, pray. But I don't think it was fear as much as, you know, just to be on a safe side. They wanted a little extra insurance that they'd make it, see. They know that, but whenever you got hit, whenever you hit real hard, you know, everybody prayed, didn't it? Yeah, everybody prayed after that. If you knew that, you know, you could see something, this was the end, you know. Well, then the way everybody said the same thing. They'd say, oh God, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord. Seemed like they all said the same thing.
It's still hard 6 years later, isn't it? I mean, I know, and again, I don't want to delve into places that you don't want to go. I've noticed you've talked about friends, and I can tell without you even saying somebody that didn't make it, because you say, oh, Sergeant so-and-so, he was a good guy, he didn't make it, and then you move on. 60 years later, does a day go by that you don't remember or think about it?
I don't think there is. Every night, same thing.
Do you still dream about it?
I don't. It used to be for a long time I dreamt it, and I haven't dreamt like this for the last couple of years. Maybe it's because I've been talking about it more or something. Of course, nobody said anything about it until the last couple of years. But I used to be fighting, and I had my gun, and I'd be just shooting as fast as I could, you know. And but nobody'd fall. No, I wasn't. Just like they weren't. I wasn't hitting them. I had to be hitting them, you know. But nobody'd fall. I used to dream that all the time, you know what I mean? And then I'd wake up, and I'd be glad when I woke up. But the main thing is, you know, that's when you really start feeling bad. Like, well, you felt like you'd pray like that. Like I said, with the guys around you. You know, you could hear them praying, "Oh Lord, oh God." And but then in Normandy there, when we got up on the hill, and we joined up with our outfits, and then everybody scattered. And, you know, they went to different outfits. They had us all earmarked for it. I was earmarked for the armored infantry and 2nd Armored Division replacement, and I was a scout because I was more suitable for being a scout right from the very beginning, you know.
Yeah, you had all those skills from
Yeah.
your trapping days and
Yeah.
stuff on top of all the training you received. And
Yeah, it's just like that when I made an application for transfer to the 10th Light Infantry. I probably told you that. Yeah, and I was well qualified. Old Dole was on the you know, that he was on the board. I got the paper at home, and where the list of the men that run the American Ski Association. But after we dumped all of our gear and got some decent clothes on, we did that right away. After they told us that there's gas masks laying every place. I threw the mask out and I kept the bag to carry some incidentals in, you know. But as far as comradeship is concerned, we got in naturally. You lost the guys were gone that was with you. You always wonder for a long time when did they leave, if they ever got killed, you know. And sometimes it's surprising. You'd hear them, they got killed, and God, they just got killed. And all the time they was someplace with a unit back in there, see. But we had that little girl in Normandy. You heard about that, and you've probably seen about that.
no, which
I wrote an article on it, and the girls copied it. And we called her the little angel of Normandy. And we was guarding our area, and we had a big colonel, was a CO, commanding general of the 41st Armored Infantry Regiment. Naturally, he was part of the 2nd Armored Division's right-hand man. And his name was Colonel Hines, great big giant of a guy. And when we could always tell, and we was on post up where the opening was into the area where the regiment was, you know. Had to go through between them. There's a break in the hedgerow there. And we'd be on guard there all the time, watching and checking all the day, because we could always tell when the colonel was coming, because the Jeep was sloping it one way. When you see it drive, he was sitting down. He was a guy that you'd want to go into, the guy that you would absolutely want to lead you if you was gone into battle. And because I had words with him right there, you know. He'd come in all the time, and we'd salute him. Anyway, we had strict orders, no civilian personnel allowed into the area at all. It's closed, you know. We was filling up all these areas then, and there was just the line on the front was just steadfast. They were just shooting back and forth with artillery and stuff. Sometimes it'd be heavy, sometimes it'd slack off. Most times they didn't want to give away their positions, so whenever they fired something, well, then they knew it was going to get a bunch of it back. So they was always holding. The first night on my assignment, when I got up there, I don't think I'd reached my outfit yet, but some officers told us there, well, get out. Or there was a hospital up on top of the hill, made out with tents. Get out and scatter around this hill. They were always worried about the Germans sneaking in our lines, and just get out and just disperse around and watch everything. I crawled in underneath some brush where I could watch, and the idea was nobody got to relieve us. You had to keep your eyes open all night. I thought, well, they're just testing us. So the next morning we got, before we moved on to locate our outfit, well, they asked us, well, what did you see? I says, well, the only thing I seen, it was dark, but I could see off in the distance, there was a big German gun over there, and I could see it go off. I could see the fire, it would light up the flash, come up the sky. And then I could hear it, and then you could hear the explosion back in our lines, And that thing, it was just a harassing fire. It must have been a railroad gun. It was a big gun. It wasn't a battery of them. It was just one gun. He kept doing it all night long. I'd watch it there. Well, that's what I told him I seen. I said, well, you seen right, that was it. So, but as we moved up, just preparatory, to jump off the line, we had to break out of the Normandy pocket because we'd captured Cherbourg, it had, and German General von Schlieben was his name. I got a picture of him in those papers. And so, like I said, we was at this post, we was guarding the compound area. That's where the colonel come in all the time. There was always lots of meetings. See? And this little girl, we looked down there one time, and he got chewed out because he was smoking a cigarette. The guy was with me. And so, and I knew then that, boy, that colonel, he's a pretty tough guy, because he got chewed out, and the guy felt so bad about it. He really felt down about it, I mean, just like he's being showed up, He says, well, you're on duty. I said, well, I says, now I'm going to have a talk with the colonel next time he comes in. I said, that ain't right. So I was shaving, and my helmet was full of water, and I had soap all over my face, and here come the colonel a day or so later. And I went down there. I stood him. I told him, I said, Colonel, sir, I'd like to say a few words. I says, I think there's been an understanding here, a misunderstanding here. I was trying to put in a bid for this other soldier. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I said, we're not guards, which we were guards and everything, but we're not guards. We're just guides. We're just directing the traffic in here. He says, oh, you are? He says, well, you're on duty. He says, that's it. I said, yes, sir, that's fine. That's the way it was, And so that we looked down one day, and coming through the opening there, we had some holes dug up on the bank, and there's a little slope down to the opening. And a little girl come in. She had a little yellow flower dress on. And I looked and I seen her. She was already passed in the opening. Usually you hear vehicles, She was already past the opening anyways, probably about 100 feet. And I says, what's that girl doing down there? It said to my partner. I said, and she looked so innocent, just hair to head up in the air, just wasn't carrying anything. And just like a little flower, And I said, why don't you stop her? I says, why don't you stop her? He says, well, why in the hell don't you? I said, oh, I don't know. I says, she's not supposed to be in here, but by then she's up quite a ways, and we'd let somebody else tell her, So, but she come in every day then. She'd come in around, and then she went up and found her when we wasn't on duty there in post. We had our holes dug up along the hedgerow, and she'd come in, and she knew that we was up there, had been up there guard at times, And she was the nicest little girl you ever seen. She was about 9 years old. And she'd come in and she'd sit up on the hole. We had our pup tents pitched over the holes, and she'd talk and teach us a few words in French, and stuff like that. And boy, it really brought the morale up of everybody, because everybody'd be waiting. She'd go by one hole, and they'd be all looking, waiting for her to come up to their spot. And she was here to hit us. Well, we'd give her anything to make her happy. I mean, gosh, we wanted to be friends with her. Like, we'd give her cigarettes and could take home to her dad and her mother, and give her some of that hard chocolate, that black stuff, in our K rations and anything like that. And I think there was some gum too we'd give her. And she was just as nice, and she wouldn't ask for nothing. I mean, she just talked to us there, and we'd give them to her. It went on all just well. And then finally, that they said that the planes would come over every day, German planes, and they would come in and they would strafe, drop their bombs strafe, and they'd always come in from the ocean direction, so that when they got hit, they'd be come down over enemy lines, you see, so it wouldn't be falling on our lines. And so the machine guns would open up, and a lot of the stuff was coming down. They could, we had 50 caliber machine guns. Everybody'd be shooting them, anything they had. We had 50s there, and 30s stuff. Well, but anybody, when they opened up with the anti-aircraft stuff, talking about 20 millimeter stuff, well, then it's a little different. The stuff would come down in bigger chunks. They were showing up through them shelter halves, where the tents, you see holes there. It had to become, so there was guys getting hit too. See? So they had to discontinue that stuff and just small arms fire for them. No heavy anti-aircraft guns at all. It was too low. And but she would come in every day like that little girl. And one day, by God, we was looking for her, and she never showed up. We'd had planes come over, and German planes made their run, and she never showed up. We wondered what in the heck happened. Where was she? She's late today, and everybody was watching. I mean, guys, all the soldiers up along the hedgerow, all waiting for her. And they just got so where everybody, when they got a chance to say something, where's the little girl? Nobody knew where she was. What happened? And then finally we got the message that there was a truck driver, and he was a nice truck driver. He was just about the same age as I was. He was 19. And he wasn't right directly in my unit, but he serviced my unit. You know what I mean? He's a driver, one of the supply trucks, and his name was Pee Wee Rockwin. And what had happened? He'd parked the truck out in front of this barn, which was okay. I mean, actually, there's so much stuff parked around that didn't make much difference. All kinds of targets, And the German planes come by, and the little girl happened to be down there getting ready to go up to the hill where we were. And she went underneath the truck, and he got into the truck to put the truck into the barn, out of sight a little bit, and run over her head and crushed her. That was bad. We missed her. And so I got sort of disgusted after that, I mean, the way things there. That was probably one of the biggest shock to us that had happened up to that point. So then it was just shortly thereafter that they called us in in the evening for a conference, to get around. We was outside, and we all gathered around and says, well, this is it. Tomorrow morning at 06:30, we're going to go we're going to start the attack. And it'll be 1,500 planes come over beforehand to saturate the bombing of this roadway on the main road, on sort of actually in a easterly direction, but a little bit slope northeasterly a little bit, and it was the main road through St. Louis. There is a mix up as far as some of the stuff I've read, but I was right there, and I know what it was, and So they saturated, the planes come over in the morning, and before it, we jumped off. We were supposed to go through the LOD, the line of departure. I think it was at 6:30. Of course, daylight then, you know. And we said, okay, everybody draw their what ammunition that they're required. They give us, you know, they have a regular quota of each man, and grenades and mattress covers. You know, everybody make sure that they get the mattress cover. They told us, as there's a lot of you people that might not be here in a couple days. That this ain't no joke. So you just well be prepared for it. It's going to be a bad situation. Oh, so we accepted it that way, and we respected them telling us these things. So in the morning, we jumped off there and they'd bomb just like that. Then the artillery fire. I think the artillery laid in for a while, and then it was lifted too. And we seen the planes coming over, you know, and the bombs were hitting. You could hear them real easy, and they wasn't very far away. So we took off on the road, and he's lined up. They give us the strict orders too, the night before, that nobody can be turned around and go the opposite direction. If anybody gets into resistance, or you know what I mean, or they don't like it or anything like that, you're subject to being shot. And it says all vehicles that's gone the opposite direction will be turned off the road, rolled off the road. And that's it, cleared, because it's very vitally important, because the engineers was going to go in. Right after the bombing, there'd be craters all over the place, see. The engineers had to go, and my engineering outfit, they went in and they bulldozed the the road and leveled out as much as they could, you know. And so when we started forward then, we didn't go very far. We wasn't even up to the line of departure yet when we seen MPs out in the middle of the road waving us, flagging us off on another side road, off this main road. I didn't like it because it was gone into a narrow road off to the right, but it went up around the ridge line, sort of a natural amphitheater-like deal. And we looked down to our left, and there was a church down there. And we could see them hauling the white mattress covers. We could see them hauling in the whole bottom of the field down by the church. Behind the church was all white already, and they was hauling them in to beat heck and laying them in rows there in the mattress cover. There was the bodies of the guys that were killed by the bombs. They dropped the bombs on our own people. Well, it was hard to say. They said there was over 100 just casual, information. It wasn't verified. And then it went up. Well, it says there was under 200 there that was killed. So we never know. They don't say that in any of the tale. They don't say that in any of the stories I've read about how many men or whatever. They don't describe that incident. So they told us, I said, what are they making us go around here like this up on the hill? I talked to one of the officers there. Well, he says, they think that it would affect the morale of the troops moving into the battle, by that way. But that wasn't the case. I mean, it wouldn't have affected our morale at all. If anything, it wouldn't make us want to fight that much more, And if it starts affecting your morale like that there, then your war is no place for you. I mean, that's the case in a lot of cases. War, people are all sensitive. You can't treat them all the same way. There are certain limits and stuff that they can stand, and then if you go beyond that, you're worthless to you. And so we seen them there. We went around, and then we dropped down into the battle. And as we dropped down into the fight, and then we were beyond the advanced troops were the ones that were in position already, not the ones that was moving in. It wasn't the attacking force. It was the guys that was on the further for the most point of the line of the front. And so that's the ones that got killed a lot right then. But of course, then after we moved into there, and we crossed the line, that's the line of departure. When we crossed the line of departure, and you could tell it was everything tore all the heck. And then the fire started, really heavy.
Do you remember, because San Lo is kind of denoted as one of the bloodiest battles?
It was a bloody.
Do you remember what it sounded like?
Well,
what it smelled like? I mean,
yeah, I remember every bit of that. I'll never forget that. I've heard about many other battles. They were battles, but then when they were over, you could take a breath of fresh air. When we dropped in, there was just like a sea of red fog and dust. And the visibility was, in some places, it wasn't, it was right close. You couldn't see any further than that. The ground had raised up. And all these bombs and stuff, the ground had raised up, and it was just like there was no breeze at all. And it was like the earth was suspended in the air. They have a name for that, and they said it's a certain thing. I forget what it is now, but and the sun was up above, I think, causing a red look to everything. But yet there was fires every place, but you wouldn't get the red. You had to get a reflection, this glow through this dust, and it was bad. It was bad. The smell was so bad, and everything, and bodies burning and stuff, and hanging out of tanks, and the tanks exploding. That was where you get trapped and moving forward. And finally, we got off the road. We weren't on the road no more, the main road through that. It was just, and you'd go around the corner, and then everything was shooting. Other soldiers running every direction. I was in the half track, of course, and most of my focus, my attention was to tell the driver. I was hanging back. Tell the driver, back up, right, more right, and then I could see up above better than he was. He was down and looking through them. He was buttoned up with steel in them slots down below the visible ports. You look out to. He couldn't see much, and we would go, and then there would be a tank beside us exploding or something like, and burning, and they'd keep exploding, and sometimes they'd just blow up completely. And it didn't make any difference what tanks were. They were Americans or Germans. You said they was all mixed right in there, Soldiers would be running back and forth there. They didn't act like they knew where they was gone, and we didn't know where we was going.
So everybody, Germans, Americans, intermingled,
all mixed up. We was right in that. It was right in the town, So finally, the firing was just constant. The crescendo of it, was just constant. You could never hear anything else. That was it. Well, as far as I was concerned, I just thought, well, this is it. And this was maximum. Nothing will be any worse than this. This was hell. It was too. Nothing had ever happened. Even if you got killed, it'd be better than that, And so I just took it. The first indication I got is that we went through the MLR, the main line resistance, was I could hear constantly the German submachine guns, going, how they do their, call them machine pistols, or burp guns is what they were. And they was just gone steady. And a lot of soldiers were armed with them. And a lot of your tank men had them on too, for their personal weapons. They were easy to handle in tanks. And so that was constant, and then we got through that, and the first indication, then I could hear the burp guns started, and then I hear bigger guns too, the tank guns, the big ones, 70 75, some 77s, I think they had two. I think he got improved them on a little bit. But the burp guns, they would started dying down. They'd be more sporadic, you know, and more distinct that way. You know what I mean? You could hear more. The other was just all blended into one smash, you know. And we had reached the outside limits of the town. We made a left turn off the main roadway, then down another road. And we pulled in behind and between the Germans. There was a big farmhouse, a stone one, between us and the Germans, so we could be hid back there.
How long were you in that hell? Did time have any relevance to you? I mean, when you look back, do you know, were you there a minute, an hour?
It seemed like a long time. It seemed like it was all day, but it was a while, you know. I mean, maybe a few hours, you know, half a day, something like that, you know. But you didn't have no recollection and relativity as far as time was concerned. It was the only time we looked at or thought of was this, what was happening now and continuing, you know. When we went behind this big farmhouse, the guy we dashed out, one man left one man in the half track on the guns, and I made a mistake and I went to the left of the building and the other guys went to the right of the building. And then I started, it was so much heavy fire, and it was in a tree area, bushes, and gosh, the bullets had gone through there like hail, you know, like if though I had just clipping through, and I started digging into a ditch. There was a long sloping ditch. It went right straight in front of the enemy lines, right straight where the Germans were. And I was digging in there because I thought, Jesus, I looked around, there was nobody around me. But I had a heck of a time trying to cut through the roots of that little trenching tool, you know, and get it down in. I finally broke through the sod and the roots a little bit. And then I didn't know how far I was going to have to go for right away. I was dig another hole, you know. But some big guns moved in on my left, and then they moved up close to me. And I didn't see them coming in a turmoil, you know. And they were about, I think, a whole battery, 4 105 howitzers. And they moved in there, and like I said, I didn't see them coming in, and actually I wouldn't have been there if I had because I was a little bit forward of them, but a little bit to the right. Too close to be in front, too close to actually. And boy, they let go, and my God, I thought, of all things, now what, you know? Why, what have we got now? That's just the way it felt. Well, it felt like it just resigned to the fact all this stuff happening, and then this happened. I didn't know what the heck. I thought it was, the Germans had some big guns, and I thought they was right there, you know. They moved behind me on the right, and it was such a turmoil. I hadn't seen anything to shoot at. I was completely worthless. I was in the half-track regular, you see, we had machine guns on there. And so a truck pulled in by me there, and I had to hold the gun that far. Truck pulled in behind, right by the half-track, stopped. And the soldiers started piling out. They was new ones. New soldiers hadn't been in the battle yet. And believe me, I felt even at that point, I felt sorry for them, like I'd been fighting. That was my first big battle right there, you know. And I wasn't a veteran yet, you know, but it felt like I was. And they piled up, and the poor guys were, what happened, actually, I heard the platoon leader was right by me there, and he was hollering, "A rifleman here," and the other leader was hollering, "Machine gunners over here, on double, you know." And so they was all confused. I could see that, and it was still light enough to see. And the tanks, the German tanks, had moved up to that hedgerow along in front of me there, and there's trees. And boy, our P-47s, Thunderbolts, were coming down, and they'd go down on the other side of them trees, and I'd think they ain't gonna come up there, they'll get them, you know. Boy, they'd come up out of that, almost straight down, straight up. I never seen anything that looked that good to me. I'll tell you right now, them guys are doing a job, and boy, that sure helped us out, I'll tell you. We always praised that Thunderbolts and the P-40, you know, they were the P-47s. And so his officer was lining up his men and platoon leader, and by God, they let go with them howitzers on my left again. And the poor guys didn't know, they just stunned them like it did me, it almost knocked me down. And they were stacked up on that hole, but I only had it down about 8 inches. And the thing was, they were stacked all around up my feet, almost up to my waist. For, you know, because they wanted to get down, you had to get down someplace. And then I told them that's their own artillery, it's right there. I said, they felt better about that, but then they took off, started advancing up the ditch there to the, and the things slackened off. What happened? We moved out of town, and the German Panzers had moved back. See, so the main ridge of fire was right along on the outskirts of the town, along that first hedgerow there, you know, on the tree lines. So the town, you still hear a lot of explosions back there, you know, to our right there, but you couldn't tell it was guns or tanks exploding and stuff. I heard somebody holler at me, "Woko, Woko." I heard it. And it says, "We're moving up. We're moving up." I went back to the corner of the building. He says, "We're moving up." They didn't know where I was. So I dashed over around the corner there to the half track. And he was already starting to move. And I swung up on there and got in the half track, and we started heading out to the main road, turn left to go. And then at that point, I didn't know anything and I can't figure out what happened. I don't think, because I wasn't hit, but I didn't remember anything after that point. I mean, I think that what maybe happened, but maybe one of them shells or something like that must have my mind stopped my mind a little bit, and I didn't want to think that, you know, that my dad had told me about these people shell shocked in World War I, and I didn't want to be shell shocked, and so when I remember hit that road, and then the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was sitting in the back of the half track, and I was aware of the other soldiers there, and it was dark, and I was aware of the other soldiers there, but I felt so good. I didn't have a pain or discomfort in any manner. I just felt good, and I just like I really hadn't got my bearings where I was. See, and I didn't want to say anything to the guys because I didn't want to break that spell. You know, if it was just imagination or what. But then right away, I heard a tank was on our left. I heard a tank running and some guys talking. And we stopped. And then the guys got up, and I hear a plane come over. An enemy plane coming over, and he dived down. Well, he come down, and it was right by this house. And the house was on fire on the right. When he come down, everybody says, "Don't look up," because the phosphorus, your face will show up with a light reflection, you know, from that fire there, from that house burning. And then hold your fire. But the guy in the tank didn't. And he opened up with a machine gun. The flames circled around. So one plane come down, let us have it. All 6 or 7 bombs. Right on target. That pretty much fixed up my outfit right there. I mean, all we got, my buddies and stuff there, after we made it through that town. And then we done it. But my best buddy, he was with me, and he got hit. And he got hit in the back with shrapnel, and it was lucky because we was lying on our left sides, and he was laying up against me, and he got it in the back. And if he hadn't have been there, I'd have got it in the back. See, he got 3 pieces in him, and then I didn't see him anymore. After that, he made it, I guess, but I got him. He's lucky enough to get a medic and all that stuff.
This is kind of a weird question, but did you ever get hungry during this?
Well, I'll tell you, when the only time you get really hungry is if you get a chance to relax and stuff. Then you're, otherwise, like for instance, I didn't think I'd ever eat again. And when I was into that smell and stench of the burning, the smoke and the burning bodies and stuff, I didn't figure. I figured I knew I wasn't going to eat for a while. I wasn't hungry at all.
Does that smell impregnate you? Does it just?
Well, it does at times. It didn't gag me, but it was just very repulsive. And just you wouldn't want to smell around when you're eating. Then after that, you get at then the bodies, after they started decaying, because we moved on in the St. Denis Legast and other, towns around there. We had the presidential citation at the St. Denis Legast. We was up against the 2nd Panzer Division SS and the 17th Panzer Grenadiers SS.
Are there things today that, if you're out working in the yard or driving somewhere, a smell or a sound or things that trigger, that bring back the memories vivid?
Well, I get, there's still times I'll be back, and then a noise will get me. I mean, my God, it just snaps right now instantly. Somebody drops something and just goes through me like a knife, and I think, I can, if I'm prepared for anything like shooting a rifle or anything like that, I have no problem with it, but sometimes it just gets me. And there's days you wake up, you just don't want to hear any noise at all. You just don't want to hear anything at all. I know my wife gets up and she makes some, and I tell her I shouldn't be the way I do about it, but sometimes I tell her, oh my God, you get up and you sound like an avalanche, I tell her that, but it's me, the one thing that smells that bothered me for a long time, and I don't think people realize it, and that's blood. It's spoiled blood, old blood. I could smell that. It'd get me, but now for a long time now I haven't been bothered by it. But I can smell blood right now. Dried blood or old blood, because you could smell it. It smells like a body odor, and it's really strong. I used to smell it all the time when I get. And human blood is the worst, if you to smell it, like somebody get a nosebleed or something, but. So that's one thing I didn't like. I never did like the smell of blood.
I gotta switch tapes here just a second.